Live here on Live Now from Fox, the former now NFL player, he was dropped by his team, the Raiders. It was his second year in the NFL. He was involved in that crash, just 22 years old, driving a Corvette that was going down the road just before 3:40 a.m. It does look like we may be getting some sound. Let's listen in here.
So I'm going to be focusing on this man. Okay? Okay. Who wants to go first?
Mr. Wilson, what can you tell us about the known facts of the crash? Speed, behavior. What do you know?
Well, let me start off by saying this is a very tragic and sad day in this community. A woman lost her life. Another person perhaps lost his career and is perhaps going to prison. This was a very, very ugly day yesterday morning.
How do you feel about the bail being set at $150,000 instead of $1 million?
A bail is determined by a judge, and the judge heard both arguments from both sides, and I respect the judge's decision.
Do you have any details on the victim as of right now?
I believe it's a 23-year-old female. I don't believe she's married or has children.
What messages does this bring up that he hired a high-profile attorney, he has a clean record, but he will most likely make bail and be free until, he has to come back in court again?
Life is about choices. Mr. Ruggs made a choice. And the difficulty I have is there's so many alternatives. There's ride sharing. There's a designated driver. There's a taxi. There's so many alternatives. But Mr. Ruggs made a choice, and he's going to have to live with the consequences.
Sir, how is the family dealing with this right now? I know it's got to be extremely difficult.
I just met the family this morning. The family's torn apart, as anybody would be. This was a terrible, terrible collision. So they're mourning their loss. They're grieving. They're mad. They have all of the emotions you would think a family would have.
Have you heard anything about a race or racing, or do you think Mr. Ruggs was driving on his own? Do you know any of those facts?
This is an ongoing investigation. This accident, this collision, just occurred 2 days ago. So it's an open investigation. Metro's investigators are still investigating all of the facts. My understanding is there may have been other people with Mr. Ruggs earlier in the evening, and all of those things are going to be looked into.
Once again, we've been listening into this as there was that deadly crash that took place with Las Vegas Raiders wide receiver Henry Ruggs III. He, again, was involved in this crash that did take the life of a 23-year-old female.
Let's get right to breaking news. Tonight, the Raiders announced they're releasing Henry Ruggs III from the team after a crash which took the life of a 23-year-old woman. We're still waiting to hear her name. Sports Director Brian Salmon here in studio with the latest developments.
Yes, Marie, it's been a whirlwind of a day for the Raiders organization surrounding the fatal car crash involving 22-year-old Henry Ruggs III and his 22-year-old passenger, Kiera Janae Kilgo Washington. And after doing their due diligence, the Raiders have released Henry Ruggs III, so he is no longer a part of the Raiders organization. And somewhat of a surprise considering the team's release earlier this afternoon, in which the Raiders confirmed knowledge of the incident, began with the process of fact-finding, and stated that they would not have further comment at that time. Clearly, whatever facts they found was enough for them to release Ruggs from the team. Now, a tragic situation off the field when things were going so well for Ruggs on the field. Henry Ruggs, who's a second-year player and the first ever draft pick by the Las Vegas Raiders, ranked second in the NFL in yards per catch, averaging 19.5 yards per catch. Ruggs had 2 touchdowns through 7 games after having just 2 total touchdowns in all of his rookie campaign. But that's all moot now and meaningless because the NFL also, they sent out their condolences, releasing a statement saying, quote, "Our hearts go out to the family and friends of the victim of this horrific tragedy. We will continue to gather facts and monitor the matter under our policies, but our thoughts at this time are with those impacted by this devastating incident."
Devastating, no doubt. So, Brian, what does this mean for team morale after losing, of course, Coach Gruden just a few weeks ago?
Well, that's a very good question. Of course, we will hear from their interim head coach, Rich Bisaccia, and quarterback Derek Carr tomorrow. I'd imagine the players' thoughts and prayers go out to the family and friends of the person who lost their life, as well as their now former teammate Ruggs, who has much bigger priorities. As far as football is concerned on the field, the team should be fine. They're in sole possession of first place, a position nobody thought that they would be in. They're 2-0 since Gruden's resignation, but right now, I'm sure everyone around that organization, thoughts and prayers are going out to the horrific tragedy that happened today.
Brian, thank you. Let's continue now our team coverage. Our Lauren Clark with fans reacting to the news. But first, she shares the latest from police and witnesses who describe what they saw near Rainbow and Spring Valley Parkway.
We now know the victim is a 23-year-old woman. Her identity expected to be released by the coroner's office once her family is notified.
It was horrible.
Horrible.
It was an unfortunate situation that happened. Somebody lost their life.
And tragic. That's how Raider fans describe a fatal crash involving wide receiver and budding star Henry Ruggs III. The crash happened around 3:30 this morning off Rainbow and Spring Valley Parkway. Police say surveillance video shows Ruggs driving a Corvette at high speed, veering into a lane and hitting a Toyota from behind. This video, filmed by a witness, shows the Toyota burst into flames, trapping the driver inside.
I heard like loud noise, like car, like bomb, bomb coming this way. When it came car, suddenly they get in. I heard loud noise, like a boom. When I came down here, it was like big mess on the street, like parts all over the place, everything. So I go back to my backyard. I hear like helicopter coming, police, everything loud noise. Like I don't know. And I see one guy. I don't know what car he's coming from, but he's trying to help somebody.
Despite attempts to save her, she was pronounced dead by first responders. Police say Ruggs stayed on scene and showed signs of impairment. The 22-year-old is facing 2 felonies, DUI resulting in a death and reckless driving.
You don't drink and drive. That's just being stupid.
That's why you don't drink and drive. You got to be responsible.
Las Vegas Raiders wide receiver Henry Ruggs III is going to face drunken driving charges for a deadly crash. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police say Ruggs was driving a Chevy Corvette around 3:40 this morning when he rear-ended another vehicle at Rainbow Boulevard and South Spring Valley Parkway. The other vehicle caught fire and the driver was pronounced dead. Police say Ruggs was taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries and is going to be charged with driving under the influence resulting in death. Ruggs was taken 12th overall in the 2020 draft by the Raiders. Katie Johnston for CBSN, Los Angeles.
The shocking news involving Raiders wide receiver Henry Ruggs in this fatal crash has shaken Raider Nations to the core. Raiders Black Hole Vice President John Vizcarra sat in the chapter's Las Vegas office stunned by the news that wide receiver Henry Ruggs was involved in a fatal car crash early this morning. He came away with a few minor injuries, but the person he crashed into died.
Tragedy, it's unfortunate. It's, you know, as a fan, our first inclination, I think, would be to think selfishly, what's this going to do to the season? What's this going to do to the player, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, we have to resist thinking that. We have to look more at the human aspect of it.
Raiders fans took to social media to express their thoughts both on the accident and on the future of the season.
My heart goes out to the family. You know, my heart goes out to the team and everybody, you know, that's affected by this. You know, it's a punch in the gut for Raider Nation. The team is built through adversity and built for adversity, and I know they'll be fine on Sunday.
Raiders
with a crash that claimed the life of a young Las Vegas woman.
You can see right here the mangled mess that's been left behind after that fire ignited from that crash.
The Fox 5 drone above the crash scene here in the West Valley.
Yeah, marks on the road. You can see right there those green lines as investigators were trying to determine what played out. This is happening near Rainbow Boulevard and Spring Valley Parkway.
And after a closure for the entire morning commute, a tow truck finally moved out the two cars involved this afternoon. And here is the very latest on the investigation tonight. Ruggs is booked into the Clark County Detention Center tonight. A 23-year-old woman and her dog were killed. We're waiting for her identity to be released by the coroner.
Police say 22-year-old Ruggs was driving that 2020 Corvette. It hit the rear of that Toyota RAV4. Investigators say Ruggs stayed on the scene and did show signs of impairment. He's due back in court tomorrow. Plenty of neighbors in the West Valley startled from their sleep by the sound of the impact of that crash.
One witness shared the aftermath as Ruggs and his girlfriend came out of the Corvette following the crash.
I was doing my laundry when I heard a big bang. Actually, I have more than one.
That neighbor told us he sees tons of crashes in the area, so he didn't think much of it.
But then I started hearing people yelling when I got too close to the wall that it's dividing the street and the apartments. I saw people try to get the person, whoever was inside, was unconscious because they were yelling to get him out, get out, but that person was not responding.
He says he ran back to his apartment complex to grab a fire extinguisher.
I got to the wall and I handed the fire extinguisher to somebody in there that was already helping. And by the time I tried to climb into the wall and jump to the outside, then a big fireball just came out of the car and we all backed up. So there was nothing that we could have done then. And I saw people very frustrated. I was very frustrated because I couldn't do anything.
And this is when he saw two people sitting on the ground.
I'm like, I'm going to get closer to see if they need any help.
He says the pair looked young, but they were conscious and upset.
And I can tell that he was mad, that he was conscious of whatever was going on because he was cursing and then he knew what happened.
Breaking news at midday. You are looking now at the official mugshot of Henry Ruggs III. Police say the former Raider was driving drunk, going more than 150 miles an hour when he crashed into a car, killing a young woman driving. We've also learned the victim is 23-year-old Tina Tintor of Las Vegas.
Now, Ruggs was wheeled into the courtroom just moments ago. You can see video here from the courtroom where they just brought him in. He was also wearing that neck brace. You can see District Attorney Steve Wolfson spoke right after court as well.
We have team coverage on all these new developments. Alyssa Bethencourt was at this morning's hearing. She'll have the latest from court. But we start with Ross DeMattei in studio here with more on the arrest report that just came in. Ross.
The arrest report really paints a tragic picture of what happened to the victim in this case early Tuesday morning. As you guys mentioned, police say Ruggs was traveling more than 150 miles per hour in his Chevy Corvette when he struck the victim, Tina Tintor's car. Tintor's car then caught on fire. Two men who witnessed that crash tried pulling her out of the car, but were unable to because she was pinned inside. Tintor and a dog that was riding in the back seat were both killed. At court this morning, District Attorney Steve Wolfson says Ruggs' blood alcohol level was twice the legal limit at the time it was drawn. The report also states Ruggs refused a field sobriety test when officers arrived at the scene. And police say they also collected a gun from the floorboard of Ruggs' car as well. Guys, we are getting new details all the time. We'll keep you updated if we hear anything new. David Kalina.
That's a lot. Thanks, Ross. Ruggs' first court appearance this morning with his legal team standing by.
A judge read the former Raider his charges after the hearing. District Attorney Steve Wolfson spoke about the case, like Ross just mentioned as well. Our very own Alyssa Bethencourt was in the courtroom this morning. She's live right now from Regional Justice Center. Alyssa?
We now know that former Las Vegas Raiders player Henry Ruggs III was traveling at 156 miles per hour yesterday morning before the crash. That crash ended up killing a 23-year-old woman and her dog. Now, Ruggs appeared in court this morning facing charges connected to the deadly crash. In court, prosecutors said his blood alcohol level was 0.161, more than 2 times the legal limit. Police said they also found a black iPhone and a gun, which were found in in the passenger side floorboard of Ruggs' car. Court records show the 22-year-old could face 2 felony charges, DUI resulting in a death and reckless driving. The state is also looking at another possible charge for that firearm that was found. Judge Joe Bonaventure set his bail at $150,000 and ordered Ruggs to abstain from alcohol and other controlled substances. He was also ordered not to drive and to surrender his passport. We heard from